The coastal fortress known as Fort Terry was located on Plum Island, a small island located just off the coast of Orient Point in New York, United States. This advantageous location provided it with a commanding view over the Atlantic entrance to the Long Island Sound, which is a very important economic area. It began operations in 1897 and continued to be utilized on a sporadic basis until the conclusion of World War II. In 1952, it was converted into a military animal and biological warfare research center. In 1954, it transformed into the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, which was under the administration of the civilian government. In spite of the newly implemented civilian authority, the biological warfare mission persisted until 1969, when the United States formally terminated offensive BW research. Both the selling of the island and its transformation into a wildlife reserve are currently under consideration. The year 2021 marked the year that Fort Terry was included on the National Register of Historic Places. Changes were made at the stateside forts in the aftermath of the United States' entry into World War I in April of 1917. These changes were undertaken with the intention of incorporating some coast artillery weaponry into the conflict on the Western Front. All of the heavy and railway artillery in the United States was manned by the Coast Artillery Corps throughout that war. Forts located within the United States were reduced to a minimum garrison in order to provide gun crews in France. The forts were particularly significant because they served as centers for training and mobilization. 1917 saw the dismounting of the 4 6-inch guns that were part of batteries Floyd and Dimick. These guns were then installed on field carriages so that they could be used in France. It is believed that the pair of 5-inch guns belonging to Battery Kelly were remounted at Fort H.G. Wright until 1919, when they were eventually dismantled. It would appear that the 6-inch guns have arrived in France, but since there was insufficient time for training, none of the 5-inch or 6-inch batteries were used in combat during that conflict. The firearms were never actually brought back to Fort Terry. Reloading 4 mortars concurrently in one pit was a tedious process. Therefore, in 1918, 4 of Battery Stoneman's mortars were removed. This was done in order to improve the amount of time it took to reload the mortars. During the course of the war, none of the mortars that were taken as part of this operation were transported to France. Instead, many of them were converted into railway artillery. As a result of the conclusion of World War I, Fort Terry was deemed to be redundant and placed under the caretaker status of personnel stationed at Fort H.G. Wright. 1920 saw the construction of 2 anti-aircraft batteries, each of which had 2 guns. These batteries were most likely armed with the 3-inch cannon M1917. The Portsmouth, New Hampshire National Guard Armory used Fort Terry as their summer encampment and training location in 1924. Fort Terry may be found in Portsmouth. The Searchlight Battalion was responsible for tracking the airborne balloon targets that were being fired at by the gun and machine gun battalions during the early morning hours. There were 133 persons residing on Fort Terry when the federal census for the state of New York was conducted in 1930. In 1930, the Department of Justice carried up a study on the possibility of constructing a jail on the island with a capacity of 1,000 cells. However, the study was deemed unfeasible and the prison was not constructed. Disarming of the 3-inch gun batteries Hagner, Grebel and Campbell took place between the years 1932 and 1934. During World War II, the post served as a training center and supply depot, as well as a lookout for German U-boats and planes. Additionally, it was used as a lookout for German aircraft. As of the 7th of December in 1941, the fort was reported to be staffed by the 242nd Coast Artillery Regiment, Harbor Defense, of the Connecticut Army National Guard. On the eastern side of Plum Island, there is still a network of trenches that were left behind during the time that the region was used as an artillery position. The weapons at Fort Terry were rendered obsolete by the pair of 16-inch batteries located at Camp Hero in Montauk by the year 1944. As a result, all of the guns, with the exception of the 4 3-inch guns belonging to batteries Eldridge and Dalabar, were discarded.